Hi everyone and welcome to the Colour Cave. My name is Jem and I like to play with art stuff. Today I am attempting the Redraw challenge, whereby you take a piece of old artwork, preferably the older the better, and you do exactly as it says and you redraw it. The idea behind it is to see how your skills have come on, if any, and just, get a little bit of interest into your drawing. I think we're all very good at putting ourselves down and not really giving ourselves credit for improvements and things like that. So I do think it's a worthwhile thing to do, although I'm not going to lie, I'm absolutely terrified of doing this. I have picked a really good piece of art to redraw, however, and I'm sure you're going to get a good giggle once you see what it is. Let's get going. Here is my original artwork. This is from a video game called Yoshi's Story, which was released in 1997 on the N64. I remember this specifically because there was a great deal of unrest because it was a 2D platformer and the N64 was built with capabilities for 3D worlds for computer games. Anyway, computer geekery aside, this image was copied from a poster which was absolutely everywhere when the game was released, and me being a geeky gamey type, it appealed to me and I really liked the colours. I am not going to use this as my reference image because that kind of defeats the purpose. I will use the original artwork, which I'll find on the internet somewhere. But I just wanted you guys to see my efforts. At the time in 1997, I was 12 or 13 years old. So it was a little while ago, but I have to say, apart from some questionable shading under his armpit and things like that, I think I did an okay job. So it'll be interesting to see how differently I look at it now and how much my eye changes what's in front of me. So I hope you all are going to enjoy this. It's going to be good fun. When I'm finished, I will put these both side by side, the new one that I'm going to complete and this relic here, and we can see the differences if there are any. I might end up just drawing the same picture again unintentionally. Let's just see how it goes. So after much digging about, I have found the original image that I drew from, or not quite, as it may seem. If you look here and then look at my drawing is actually a mirror image of what is here on the screen. This is the closest thing I can find, so this is going to be my reference picture for my redraw. I started off just by drawing myself a midline, just really to make sure I wasn't too high or too low on the paper or too far to one side, because that's quite a few Yoshis to get into that little space. And after that, I'm just starting with my geographical shapes, so circles and rectangles and squares and all that kind of jazz. I felt that if I had the foreground Yoshi in place first, that I could use him as a sort of anchor reference point to continue on and draw the rest of the Yoshis, in behind him and beside him and so on and so forth. One of my main concerns was making sure that I had the Yoshis grouped a little bit closer together this time, because one thing I did notice when I had looked at my old drawing, my very, very old drawing, and the reference image was that there was quite a lot of space, and I think there was a big gap in between some of the characters, so I was trying to keep everything tight and as close to that original image as possible. When I say the original image, of course, I mean the reference image and not my original drawing. So we seem to be going quite well here. I'm quite happy with the way things are progressing. The good thing about doing a picture like this is, although they are at different angles and in different poses, Yoshi is quite a simple, straightforward character to draw. There's not really a lot to him. So once you've got that sort of first step, and it's usually the nose, let's face it, it's always about the nose, it's pretty easy to find your feet in terms of what the hands and things should look like. I'm glad I picked something like this and not something with really sort of complex organic squiggly bits. One of my favourite parts about drawing Yoshis is actually their eyes, because they can have such a range of emotions just from the droop of their eyelids, and it's something that I always find quite entertaining. And it is, of course, one of my sort of childhood staples. I played a lot of Nintendo when I was young. I wasn't one of these kids that was always in front of a computer, but when it was wet, which is a lot of the time in Scotland, and we couldn't play outside, that was the first port of call, was always going to play a bit of Nintendo. So I did a bit of rubbing out there. Again, this was me back to what I was just talking about the actual placement of the Yoshis next to each other. I felt that one was just in the wrong position and the wrong angle, so I went back and tried again. And there you go, there's one of those great big noses. Ah, they're brilliant, they really are. So now we're sort of coming to the end of this initial sketching phase. I've just got one little guy left to do on the left hand side there, and you can see just from the shapes that they are all very similar shapes. There's nothing complicated about mapping out a drawing, and it's something that I'm trying to learn to be more patient with. I really just want to get on and draw the details. I'm quite impatient that way. So I am practicing very hard and trying to start with these basic shapes, because if you don't get the foundation right, then it's something that's very difficult to fix later on, by which time you're too far into the drawing and you end up scrapping it and having to start again. So now I'm just filling in the finer details. I was obviously quite happy at that stage with my placement and all my big noses and things. So I'm just darkening the deciding lines, as it were, and just to differentiate them from the sketch lines, because there's quite a few sort of scratchy lines in there, and these are going to be the sort of decided lines that I will ink in eventually after I have finished this stage. Okay, there we go. First Yoshi is starting to look a bit more like a Yoshi. I kind of struggled with the fingers a little bit. They are quite bulbous, but I just felt my attempt looked like someone had blown up, like a rubber glove, into that. Yeah, okay, anyway, very mature. Okay. One of the things that I was most paranoid about when I was doing this is actually the angle of the eyeballs, for the simple fact that I really need to stop saying "for the simple fact." I'm aware that I say that an awful lot. Anyway, I digress. If you get the angle of those eyeballs even slightly wrong, it can make your characters look drunk, or just as if they've got a bit of a squint. And you'll notice as well further on when it comes to the inking, it's actually one of the last things that I did. And again, it's that same paranoia. As I was making my way onto, we'll call him Yoshi number 3, I had already started to think about the colours for these little guys, particularly this guy on the left. It's quite a pale blue, and I wanted him to still stand out, but without going too dark with my shade of blue. So while I'm sort of scribbling away here and putting fingers and things in, I'm actually thinking about coloured pencils. I did toy with the idea of doing these in marker rather than pencil, and it was kindly pointed out to me that it wouldn't really be a like for like comparison. After I finished this picture, I did actually go back and redraw it a third time, and I did do it in marker. and it turned out quite well. I was quite pleased with it. So I'll post that up on the Instagram page, which is at the_colour_cave if you've not been already, and you can see how the marker version turned out too. This was one of the hardest of the characters for me to draw, and it was just the angle of its head. I think all Yoshis are, no, I can't say that, can I? All Yoshis are boys. Oh, I might get in trouble for that. Anyway, the guy at the back who is the red Yoshi, I was trying to get the eyes again in the right position and the angle of the mouth correct to make him look as if to make it look as if it had thrown its head back slightly, which again is just in line with the reference image. Sometimes getting those angles is quite difficult to do, but again I was actually quite pleased with the way that it turned out. I didn't have to do much in the way of redoing, which is something I seem to do quite a lot of. Okay, so here we go. I am using a Pigma Micron archival ink pen. They're okay, I don't mind them. I have a full set of them, and I like them because I have the range of different nib sizes, so I could be quite selective in which one I decided to use. So round the noses was the most difficult part in terms of inking. I'm not confident with ink. I am very much a pencil drawer, and that's where I'm most comfortable. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was push that comfort zone, and be brave and use ink. And I think my fear is just that once you put that nib on the paper, you've got to start moving, and there's not a lot you can do once you've actually started. So you've got to be a bit confident in your strokes. Now, you would think that having already put everything down in pencil that this would be an absolute doddle, but I can honestly say it's something that I find quite difficult, and it's something that I do struggle with. I did make mistakes throughout when I was inking the lines in. They're not that apparent. If I was to point them out to you, which obviously I'm not going to do, then you would be like, you did make a mistake there. But when you see the overall picture, there's nothing glaringly obvious that stands out. And again, that's one of the things why I have to stop nitpicking. The image looks fine in terms of the line work. As a finished image, it looks fine. So I need to stop holding myself back and being frightened of these things. I just need to be brave and just go for it. And here's where one of the mistakes happened. When I come down to Red Yoshi's little scrunched up determined fist there, that was one of the places where I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe my brain was wandering. I'm not entirely sure what went on there. But I struggled with the fingers, and obviously by the time I realised what I was doing, it was too late. But hey ho, again, as I've just said, it's not the end of the world. You can see he's got a bit of a sort of mashed set of fingers on both his hands. Bless him, poor little soul. So yeah, that was a bit of a boo-boo on my part, but as I always say, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and I decided I was going to be brave and I was going to do it, and as you can see, I've done it. And here we are at the eyeballs, the aforementioned eyeballs. I think this is where the picture really starts to come to life, and this is where I started to get a sense of achievement out of what I was doing. It's funny how just filling in those tiny little black circles makes all the difference to a picture. It takes your characters from being completely soulless to having a bit of character and personality about them. And on to the coloured pencils. The choices I made for each Yoshi were basically a light, mid and dark tone for each character, which I picked out beforehand. The reference image shows quite heavy shadowing, and it looks as if it's been done in primarily grey, and this is particularly noticeable under the Yoshi's noses. I didn't really want to start, just because I was working in pencil, I didn't really want to start muddying it up with grey, so I chose quite a dark, you can see that one there, that's yellow ochre from the Prismacolor range if anybody is interested. So I picked a considerably darkest tone just to really sort of get that shadow in there, as I say, without sort of having to resort to grey, and I think it turned out okay. One of the things that really irritated me when I was doing this was that the camera wasn't picking up the vibrancy of the colours on the paper. It's really apparent with the yellow and also with the green Yoshi as well, and I was actually getting quite annoyed about it because I was working in quite a few layers as I went to get that really sort of rich vibrant colour as best I could and get a little bit of shading and stuff in there, and it just wasn't showing up at all. The green Yoshi looks as if I've coloured him in with a highlighter pen, I kid you not, you know, one of those green Bic highlighters. That's what it looks like, and that was after me painstakingly picking my beautiful shades of yellow and green, but there's not much I can do about that. I did, however, also notice that the same thing happened when I drew the marker version afterwards, and I went to take a photograph of it. The same thing happened, and it looks as if I'd coloured the yellow and green Yoshis in highlighter. Never mind. I thought I would just share that little rant with you, you know, so you can feel some of my pain. Whilst working on the hands, I used my dark tones a little bit more to just try and work in some contours of some sort of knuckles and shading around the fingers to give them just a little bit more depth and a little bit more of a 3D effect. I don't even know if Yoshis have proper knuckles, but really just to stop it being coloured in a sort of flat, you know, one-dimensional way. And the effect worked quite well, particularly on that hand, the left hand of the green Yoshi, as it's quite flat and these fingers are spread out. Pink Yoshi was a little bit of a dilemma in terms of picking colours as well. Again, kind of like with the yellow, I just didn't want it to look washed out. I wanted it to have a bit of that sort of fun vibrancy, but that character is quite a muted colour. And I ended up jumping between the sort of paler pinks almost into peaches through to a sort of I think the middle colour was blush pink that I used, and it just seemed to be with mixing those colours that I got, you know, a reasonably vibrant shade but still had that sort of delicateness about it. My dark shade was a problem for me because I just didn't have one. I even looked through my polychromos to see if I could find something that would be suitable. I ended up settling on a sort of almost lavender pink shade in the Prismacolors, and I wasn't entirely happy with the way it laid down on top of the other colours, but just because it was more foreshadowing than anything else, and again with that particular part I didn't have to do any hands or anything like that, so it actually worked out okay and I just let it slide. While we're on the subject of colour problems, here comes light blue guy that I was talking about. And again, I had a really odd combination of pencils that if you were blending three similar colours normally when you were colouring in or doing artwork, it's not three colours that you would normally put together. And I picked them less for the blending and more for the mixing capabilities to try and get that right shade of blue. And again, it seems to have turned out reasonably well. I do have a really dodgy electric blue Prismacolor. I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced this, but the pigment in it seems to be really waxy, and you know there's much more wax and filler than there is, you know, actual colour. And when you go to put it down and lay it down on paper, you feel like you're colouring with a really cheap crayon, you know, like when you were like 4 years old or something. And I'd kind of forgotten about that, and I started working away on that pale blue Yoshi, and then I was like, oh, here's this pencil. I might have to buy another one. It might have just been a dud, and I could maybe buy one open stock and see what you know, if it makes any difference. But if anybody else has had this with any of their Prismacolor pencils, please tell me about it in the comments, because it's something I'm quite curious about, you know, whether or not that was just a one-off. So that would be quite nice to find out. By this part in the process, I was getting quite well versed on noses and how I wanted to shade them in. So I didn't do it deliberately, but it kind of worked in my favour to leave one of the darker colours till the end. Obviously you have a bit more leeway and it's a bit more forgiving when you're working with pale colours, but if you start laying down dark colours and you go too far with your dark pencil, you can end up with something that's really patchy, and it doesn't look right at all. So I was quite glad that I had left him to the almost end, and his nose looks beautiful, I'm sure you agree. So here's just the finishing off with the red pencil. Just wanted to sort of get that out of the way. I did go back and do the apple a bit later, but I was just getting fed up using the red pencil. I've mentioned before that I do get bored quite easily using the same colour, and I like to chop and change and switch between. I think as well it helps to sort of calibrate your eye, so to speak, just to take you away from that and come back to it. It gives you a fresh set of eyes, and sometimes you pick up maybe a bit of shading or something that you've missed, that kind of thing. Something that's quite amusing that you'll see when we get to the comparison between this picture and the 1997 edition is that in this drawing I have added in a right foot for Red Yoshi, and if you look at the reference image there isn't actually a foot there, so I have had exactly the same problem as I had all that time ago, in that my positioning of my Red Yoshi wasn't exactly where it should be, and it's something I only noticed obviously when I went back and looked at the original, that I managed to conjure up this extra shoe from somewhere. And weirdly as well, I picked the same colour for the shoe, which I'm assuming was a bit of sort of, subconscious, because I must have registered it on my original drawing, and somehow I've managed to dredge that up from the depths of my mind and do the same thing here. My colour choices here were again more for mixing capabilities rather than using a light, mid and dark tone, just to try and mimic the way that the light is cast on the shoes. Again, in the reference image, the yellow Yoshi's shoe is much darker compared to the one that is facing, sort of square onto us, and I just didn't have the right combination of colours that would look good on their own, so I decided to mix the two to try and duplicate that effect. Again, it's something I think I could probably have done a little bit more work on it, maybe used a few more shades, and I could have got something a little bit more accurate, but I was quite happy with the way it turned out. The pencil shades that I used were beige and light umber, and that combination seemed to give me quite a biscuity colour. So yeah, that was a good shout, I think. After this last foot, I moved on to the shadows on the white areas around cheeks, chins and bellies. And I did a little bit of experimenting just on a scrap piece of paper before I decided on this particular shade of grey. Again, in the reference image, the shading seemed quite severe, and I suppose that was really part of the sort of cartoonish type style of the finished picture. I wanted something a little bit more delicate, but on reflection now and having gone back and looked at the picture a few times, I actually wish I'd picked a slightly darker shade. It's something, again, that I'm trying to work on, and a lot of the time when I'm picking colours and I'm laying down colour, I could be a bit braver and go a little bit darker or a little bit more vibrant, and I don't know why I'm so cautious when I do it. I think I'm frightened of overstepping that mark of going too far and then not being able to, to pull it back. So that was probably in terms of colour with this picture, it was probably my main regret, is not making those shadows a little bit darker. Now, I mean, you can see them, but I just think they might have had a bit more of an impact if I'd either picked a darker shade or perhaps even gone in with a few more layers as I went along to, to really sort of get that contrast in there. Onto my little apple. Again, I just used the same colours as before. It seemed to be quite a simple palette that was used in the reference image, so I didn't want to start messing about with different shades of red. I wanted to keep that nice sort of simple playfulness, so I just used my Canary Yellow and Scarlet Lake, which was the yellow and red colours that I'd used for my Yoshis and their mouths and feet and things like that, and it ties in quite nicely and keeps the picture cohesive. And lastly, here's just the finishing touches, a little bit of white gel pen to do reflections in the eyes. So overall, just wanted to do a bit of comparison, and you'll see the end image just shortly. I'm not entirely sure that there was a huge amount of improvement from my 1997 drawing to now. Obviously the lines are a lot cleaner, and I think my coloured pencil use has improved, but in terms of actual drawing skill, I actually don't think there's much of a difference. It just looks like a much cleaner, tidier version. So great fun, maybe not learned an awful lot of lessons over the years, but as you can see, I'm happy with it. Thumbs are there, so all good. So you can see if you look at this old image, which is 21 years old now, geez, that makes me feel old. My colouring skills have indeed improved. Some of that is quite ropey and quite sketchy, so definite improvement there. With that blue Yoshi at the back, I have actually added in an extra shoe, so I don't know where that came from, I made that up. And the left hand shoe of the yellow Yoshi is also at a different angle, so I've managed to rectify that in the more recent drawing, which is always nice. And so yeah, I think there has been an improvement. Perhaps not an astounding one, but there's definitely an improvement from the point of view of even being brave enough to ink it in rather than just sticking with pencil and keeping everything a bit cleaner and tidier, which is great. Here's the reference image. You can see how tight the red and blue Yoshi are together at the back. So even in my redraw, I have not been able to lessen that gap particularly well. You will notice there are no shoes on show from either red or blue Yoshi at the back. In my 1997 drawing, I did add in a shoe, as I've just said, on blue Yoshi. However, I haven't done that this time round. So perhaps my perception of depth and spatial awareness has improved marginally since then. I don't think that's anything to be particularly proud of after 21 years. Other than that, I think I've got the colours a little bit closer this time as well in respect to purple shoe on the pale blue Yoshi. And that sort of thing as well. So overall, I'm quite happy with how it's turned out. I'm a bit disappointed that I didn't pull things in a bit tighter and just get them grouped in better. But considering it's been a long time since I've drawn any form of Yoshi, I'm quite pleased with it. So thank you very much for staying with me and watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That's quite important to me. And feel free to leave a comment below. I always welcome comments. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, you can subscribe, and there's plenty more videos in the pipeline here at the Colour Cave. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye.